Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our LinkedIn Live. This week, I am talking to Mary O'Brien Williams, and she is the founder of Master HR Solutions. Mary, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Samantha. It's great to be here this morning. And hello to anyone who's joined us. I'm delighted to be here today with Samantha talking about everything social media, and I suppose that policy that we all think about and we all look at from time to time, but it's always something to be looking at and to be discussing. So it's great to be here.
Well, thank you for. I know that this is a really important topic, and a lot of people forget about it actually. So first of all, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my own name is Mary O'Brien Williams. I'm the founder of Master HR Solutions, which is really, I suppose, a culmination of many, many years experience in HR, also a lot of time spent in, I suppose, a legal background as well. And I suppose my unique skill set is that I have both HR and legal qualifications. So when I'm looking at a situation for a client, I'm looking at it from, I suppose, both angles, from an HR perspective, from the legal compliance perspective, but also, I suppose, my selling point is really one of practicality. I've been there. I've been that HR soldier on the ground. I've been the HR manager. I've been the person where when the office door is closed, having to deal with the situation and look at the policy or look for a policy and maybe check if a policy has even been signed. So, I get it. I get the cold face of it. So I suppose my advice is always going to be very, very practical to the situation in front of us.
Brilliant. So you definitely know what you're talking about. And I know me, I am in that social media world, and why does it matter so much, this social media policy, that everybody has one?
I suppose social media and now AI, we know it's just so fast that it's changing. And even before today, when I was even looking at, case law on this, we've case law on this from as far back as 2007 when, I'm going to say the name Bebo here today, and some people will be like going, what's that? We've moved on significantly from Bebo. But when we think of social media, that was the early days of social media, was things like Bebo and those discussion threads. And we thought they were cutting edge at the time. Now it has just significantly moved on. And it's something that, even when I'm writing policies with clients, I'm saying, well, look, let's not just define the specifics of naming LinkedIn, Twitter, because in a month's time, we could have a new go-to platform. We could have a new TikTok. We could have a new platform that is the in-trend thing, that is cutting edge technology and things that we hadn't even thought about putting into a policy. So it's just so ever changing. And I think because it's so part of this generation's life, that it's almost like brushing your teeth, there is things that are going to be assumed if we don't set them out in a policy that are okay, that are appropriate, and maybe are wholly inappropriate in a workplace environment that would be otherwise okay. In a personal space, in a personal platform, but in a workplace platform, we have to set the rules out there as well, especially when we're talking about the brand and brand image and culture, I suppose, within an organization, and what will fit and what possibly might not fit and align with the culture and the brand of the organization. That might be an innocent personal opinion, but when linked, could be a problem through social media.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would be the key elements of a good social media policy?
Okay, so I mean, there's a number of steps. So I suppose, what do we want from a social media policy? We want something that is going to protect brand reputation. It's going to clarify boundaries. It's going to prevent harassment and discrimination within the workplace. It's going to be compliant in terms of employment law. And it's going to, I suppose, meet our obligations in terms of GDPR and confidentiality as well. So how do we do that? So, there's a number of things when we set out a policy. We look at, I suppose, our own social media platforms in the organization. What do we use as an organization? How do we communicate with our clients, with our staff, with our customers? How do we communicate day to day? Is it through videos? Is it through TikTok? Is it through a combination of all of these different things? And even within that, we need to look at other platforms as well. Do we have WhatsApps for our drivers, for example? We saw cases in recent years, the O'Donovan case, I think it was in the mid 2000s, where WhatsApp came into the mix. We had always associated with the big platforms. But WhatsApp is something where, if comments are made there that are inappropriate or not conducive to the workplace, they can be taken into consideration as well. So we want a clear policy for sure on what's appropriate in the workplace. What are the expectations? What are the do's and don'ts? I suppose the key thing with any policy then that I say is, okay, everyone needs to know it's there. So we need to communicate that policy very well. We need to educate our managers in that policy so that we're consistent in our message in that policy. And one recommendation I would do around this is when you come in for induction into a company, it needs to be very clearly set out what the expectations are in terms of social media. That, you may be very excited about starting this new role today, but it may be not appropriate or not really favorable to the company for you to maybe have a video outside the door with the logo, at 8:30 in the morning, and maybe you're taking in, indirectly, maybe you've captured 3 customers going into the building that maybe don't have knowledge that they're in that video, et cetera, et cetera. So it's being aware that what are the expectations, what are the do's and don'ts, where is that policy, signing the policy, has it been actually given out to the people, has it been explained to them, have they been trained on it, and in terms of confidentiality, what can I discuss on social media, what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate to say, what can I discuss my clients, can I discuss my colleagues, can I even if I'm saying, we celebrated a 40th birthday today and you have a video up, maybe that person isn't aware that you're sharing that video. Maybe you're out on a customer's premises and you're all excited and you're doing a video just to highlight what you're doing, and it's all great, but maybe you don't have the permission of the marketing manager to do that. And if you're not aware of that either, if it's not set out in the policy, then obviously that's an issue for the company if they want to enforce those rules later on. So policy needs to be very, very clear as to what the expectations are, what the do's and don'ts are, needs to be communicated well. You need to be trained on it. And most importantly, you need to have that policy signed off for your staff as well. If you're looking to enforce a policy, if the policy was never communicated, if it was never shared, if you don't have it signed, then you're in difficulty when it comes to maybe a procedural process later on.
And I would like to make a suggestion here as well. I think, if it's a social media policy and it's a document, it's like, oh yeah, I'll just sign it. It's like terms and conditions, I'll just sign, whereas, I think it's important to actually present it to the employees in some way, like say, like even get someone like yourself or myself in and say, this is why, this is important and this is why this says this. And, so at least you're taking them through it together. So they really have no excuse then. Do you know what I mean? I think if you explain it to
Absolutely.
them, it's actually a bit easier, because I find that people might get a big document and they might just say they've read it, but they might not have read it.
Absolutely. And I think, my philosophy, again, back to practicality, is really to set out some clear examples, especially maybe where you have new people on a marketing team, and they are obviously, especially I suppose the generations coming in now are going to be very media savvy, all over it, and that's very positive as well. It can bring real positives. We know the power of social media for companies, for brand awareness, but we also have to be aware of the situations where we need to think about the bigger picture. I've had multiple examples. I remember a good few years ago where innocently a company were doing a promotion and the marketing executive, took a shot of customers coming in but hadn't got their consent, and that went up on their social media. And, so it's not just your staff as well. Your staff can inadvertently include other people in shots that maybe have no knowledge, maybe have no consent to it. And also with your own staff, maybe you're including a staff member, for example, at a meat counter who's, a nice bloody apron, but maybe they're not really too impressed about being up in social media like that. Maybe it's not the best image to portray for the organization. And, I suppose, but the key thing is having a policy. I think there's a lot of companies out there looking at this right now that maybe say, do I need a policy? We don't do a lot of videos. We don't do a lot of promotional work. But if you don't, you run the risk, obviously, down the road of, where you get into difficulty. And we saw this in a case in 2022, and it's an unnamed case. It was a banker versus a worker. And obviously a bank is can be a very conservative environment. There's a certain culture. And, I suppose this employee was very media savvy, liked making TikToks. And look, that's great in its own right. But I suppose the company, it mentioned the company in the TikToks. They found, I suppose, that, their claim was in the dismissal that it was reputationally risky for the business in terms of their brand. And the WRC agreed with that. But I suppose a key point that the WRC made was, the importance in that case, because they followed fair procedure. They found that the dismissal in itself, I suppose, they looked at proportionality and things like that. But the key point they made was that the importance of having a policy, that they had a clear policy set out, which clearly said that this would be contrary to what would be acceptable. And we go back to what's acceptable and what's not again. And again, I think as you hit the point there, Samantha, very, very well, that it has to be practical, like not just giving someone a 3-page document to read. Give me some examples, make it visual, give some clear role plays of, for example, because that will get people thinking and make them realize, okay, I'm free to do content, I'm free to come up with great ideas, but I need to get approval from the marketing manager, my manager, the CEO, whatever the case may be, that, and because you don't want to discourage creativity either within an organization, or a good idea, or something that, look, I have a great idea to drive the business on. But what you do want is rules around that, to know what's appropriate, that, even, we talk about uniforms, and how, it's not just physically mentioning someone on a post. Maybe you're wearing a uniform and you're doing something outside of working hours that really is bringing the company into potential disrepute in terms of behavior. Maybe it's unsocial behavior in a company vehicle or something like that. And obviously, if you're driving a branded vehicle and maybe you've decided to do a few wheelies with it, or something like that, and you're obviously, but I've seen it play out, and it sounds like a ridiculous example, but these are the things, be aware of your space. I'm wearing the uniform, I'm still representing the company. And we've seen that in cases that even if it's outside working hours, where you're possibly bringing the company name into disrepute, it is something the company can potentially look at and investigate. And look,
an example actually of just something funny about wearing a uniform or wearing a brand. I remember actually I was a field sales rep years and years and years ago, and I was wearing the jacket with the logo on it and stuff. And I remember it was awful. It was a dark night, and this cat ran under my car, and I like it went out the wrong way and went under my car. I was like, oh no. And I got out of the car and I took the jacket off straight away before I actually did anything. But I remember I had to bring to the vet and But, I went to the house where I thought it came from and all of that. But, I remember even then, back then, being conscious of taking the brand off, so that, but like social media wasn't even that big back then. But I mean, someone could take a video of this cat being knocked down, and they had the brand on you, and so it's thinking about things like that. So it's about giving you freedom to create great content and be a brilliant company on social media, but just being aware, isn't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely. And another example I have is a manufacturing facility a good few years ago. They had an individual who, we've seen pranks in workplace culture, and that it has really no place there, and it can go badly wrong. But not only did this person carry out a prank, it was videoed. And when it was videoed by a colleague, they actually put it up on Twitter and hashtagged the company. Now, this company was an international, multinational organization, billion-dollar company. So this instantly went global with this really inappropriate video.
Yeah.
And needless to say, the employee in question, lost their job. But again, outside of that, we think of that, and that's obviously very unfortunate in itself, that, if we don't think we can put ourselves in a situation where, whether we're HR practitioners or whether the employee in question, we're in a dismissal type situation, a very serious situation. But also the brand, you had major, other corporations, you had clients, you had suppliers, you had people associated with that company who are saying, I'm not really sure I want to be aligned with that. So the brand impact, the possible supplier impact, the possible sponsorship impact, maybe there would be investment going on at the time. So, there can be a huge knock-on effect. So I think it's really an awareness that it can be a powerful tool, but it's something that we have to put guardrails around as well, in terms of just thinking. And I always use this phrase of big picture thinking. What are the possible risks here? Is this in keeping with the brand? What permissions do I need to get for this? Have I covered every eventuality of? If I'm videoing on a customer premises, do I have their permission to use this content? Have they been involved in it? Have they seen it before it's shared? Maybe. Is there anything that they want to edit out? And just maintaining confidentiality and maintaining boundaries. And again, it can be a very, very good platform then, but it's just understanding, when it can go wrong, it can go wrong in a really bad way.
But it's like even myself, I have some clients and they might not want people to know that they're actually working with me, so it's things like that. Like some customers probably might not want others to know that they are your customer. But yeah, that's really important. I think, so best practice. So can you give us some best practice? Where would people start?
I suppose, so you look at what you have. What do you use social media for? And, don't just think of the right now, think of down the road. If this is even a remote possibility, and it could be, I'm talking to everyone here. I'm talking to a mechanic in their garage. I'm talking to multi-million-dollar companies. I'm talking to everyone here. And it could be just a matter of you picking up the phone, or one of your colleagues who's really good speaker, picking up the phone and videoing a car sale that week. And, how do we do that? Setting up a policy around that. What are the rules really? What are the steps? So, what's acceptable? How are we going to set that out? And then really, really going to your staff with that and saying, okay, these are our platforms. This is when we're going to be using this. This is how we're going to do it. This is what is acceptable. And this is what isn't acceptable. These are the boundaries. So you're not allowed maybe video it without my knowledge or without my approval or without review and sign off by the marketing team, or, you can't just go into a client premises and get all excited about the 10 new cars that are there and maybe video their premises and video their customers. We need to understand that it's where is it specific to? Is it specific to my premises? Is it specific to my premises and clients that have been signed off? Who does it involve that has approval here? And then really in terms of communicating that out, whatever managers you have in the organization, that they're trained on the policy. So they're consistent. If they're asked a question on it, that everyone's giving the same answers, that there's not, you're not having employees comparing notes in the canteen saying, well, that's not what I was told. I was told I could do the video. I was told I could do it off my phone, at the back of the garage in my overalls. I didn't know I had to put on a suit, so it's the understanding that we're consistent in our message. It's clear, and keep it simple. If it can be written on one page or a page and a half, don't write 4 pages. We don't want to be giving, it's hard enough, we know, as HR practitioners, giving out any policy, following up on it, getting it signed off. Say what you need to say and don't say any more than that. And I would say in terms of naming out Twitter, Facebook, you can name out anything that's current and any other platforms that we may use now or in the future. Have your line in that covers you for things that are going to come on stream that are, we don't even know exist at the moment. But, we can't have some barrister or solicitor down the road going, well, that's not specifically stated there, so we're okay. That we have that line in that covers a coverall.
Gosh, it's like that. It's like that thing you hear, don't ever text anything you don't want read out in court, isn't it? It's like,
absolutely, and we need to be aware of that. And I suppose the thing about it is as well, is that the last tip I would say is that you don't want something to go nuclear before you act. I always base things on acting informally first. So if something crops up, if it's only minor in particular, you pull that employee aside and you say, look, I appreciate your enthusiasm here. I appreciate, but that's not how we do it. Follow up with a little email. I always call it a ROC, record of conversation. And, you set the expectation there. Obviously, if it occurs again, you may be looking at more of a formal process then. If the message isn't landing, and maybe going into a process of a sanction. But, we can't just go from no sanction to dismissal. And we've seen that play out in a lot of cases with social media, that even though the employee has defected from the policy, or maybe where there's no policy, a lot of the time it's found that the sanction was disproportionate. And we saw that in the very first case, the Bebo case. It highlighted that, yes, social media is now something that we have to look at in the WRC, or it was the EAT at the time. But it also highlighted that, look, you can't go from nothing to dismissal. The decision has to be proportionate. So we need to understand, what is warranting of a written warning, and what is something where, we've offences that are more serious. Maybe it's really brand damage. We're losing customers. It's gone onto social media in terms of 96 FM or Red FM or something like that national media. So we need to look at the proportion.
Like that couple at the concert, it's like that's everywhere.
But at the same time, and I've seen it play out as well. Like they're all over the media now, and we know he has resigned. I don't know the current state of play of the chief HR officer this morning, but obviously you don't want a trial by media situation either, because if they're running an internal investigation, everyone in the world has an opinion on this now already. Everyone knows what occurred. It's obviously very, very invasive for them, but at the same time, they still have to follow an internal process, and I'm sure they have a policy to lean on in that regard. And yes, some will have a policy that will say, I suppose relationships in-house are not permitted. Now others won't. And I suppose we're diverging away from social media, but again, it's social media usage that has had a huge brand impact on the company.
Yeah, I was just making the point of the fact that social media is that powerful.
Yeah, and I suppose the other thing that we know with social media, it leaves a footprint, that it's there and it can be there for quite a long time. And we talk about, search engines and searching, and this is something that can pop up again and again. And, rather than years ago, if something was said verbally, not everyone hears it, but now on social media, it's just so accessible. So we need to be made aware of that as well. And I would say, my last, I suppose, thought on it would be, get that message out from the get-go. Start that message in your induction training. Really take the time. It's not just about time and attendance, sick leave, and everything like that. Your social media policy is critical now at your induction phase to explain it, give clear examples, and set the expectations so that, from the get-go, employees coming in, especially those who are very savvy with social media, really understand that, look, I can't make videos here, or I can't make videos without permission, so that's really, really important in terms of, I suppose, what we're seeing now and how fast social media is moving and changing.
Yeah, because you sometimes see on TikTok, people in their job, a lot of air hostesses, for example, talking about their jobs and stuff. So I do wonder, I think there was one particular company, but anyway, it comes down to
British Airways have clamped down on that now. I think it was in Australia, and look, it's great, and I've watched those videos myself, and they can be really,
it is nice to see. Yeah, what they're doing.
You love to get the inside track on things. I'm guilty myself of watching, airplanes take off and, the cockpit. And it is really cool to actually get an inside glance at what, yes. And I think it's really helpful for the generation, anyone who's maybe thinking of a career change or maybe thinking of that career, nothing, it's way better than a leaflet or a prospectus absolutely. To give you an insight. However, again, they felt it was, I think in fairness to British Airways, they looked at it from an interesting perspective in that, you were highlighting a lot of information in terms of their own confidentiality, where they were nearly giving away where they were staying and things like that. And they were worried about staff safety in that regard, which is an interesting angle that, we don't think about as well with social media, that we're giving away. Maybe we're giving away in a video actual where we live. Maybe we're outside our front door. Maybe we're videoing the number, and maybe we're driving away and you can see. And next thing, someone has our actual address and we're giving away personal data without realizing it. So it was an interesting take on it. And I think, again, it goes back to the content can be useful, but, is it appropriate?
Well, I'd like to jump in here now with my opinion as well. Like, social media is so powerful and it can do so much good as well. So please don't, if Mary has scared the living daylights out of you today, don't worry. It will be all covered, you see, with a social media policy. And the power of social media, it has changed businesses, it has changed lives, it has given us people, the audience, it gives us an insight into the company. It makes your company look, if it looks like a good place to work, you're more likely to get better employees. And that's why LinkedIn in particular, the LinkedIn page, for example, LinkedIn pages, put out information, educate, empower, entertain. You can entertain, even as a brand, you can entertain. I always tell the story of a company. I was trying to get Justin Bieber tickets for my daughter when she was a teenager, and I always tell this story. And I remember saying to the company, it was a mobile phone company, and I remember saying, oh, I can't get online to get the tickets. And then they replied to me on Twitter and they said, well, actually, it's not till tomorrow. So I was there the wrong day. And so I felt really stupid. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. My teenager was freaking out. And she said, is it too late for me to say sorry? She replied. And I went, that's Justin Bieber's song. So she actually was being really cool. and saying something funny, but not damaging anybody by saying it. So you can have a personality
Mhm.
as well. So please remember that, folks. You can have a personality. You can, once you empower, you're giving information, highlight the company, highlight the staff, the team in the company. And it's one thing I do notice as well is, once you have the social media policy in place, you can't go wrong, really. And I think it is important to explain it, though, not just give them a document, make sure it's
Absolutely. And I suppose, that's it exactly, that this isn't really to frighten anyone off. We want to empower people to, the power of social media is phenomenal. The reach, where you can go with it, how you can drive your business forward. And I suppose what we want is a mechanism that's safe, and that protects the brand.
and the staff. Yeah.
Companies are working so hard and have great teams, great culture, and you want to protect that. That's something that is very, very hard to achieve in a competitive market at the moment. And if you build that up, you need to make sure that that's what's portrayed always on social media. And if it is through a good guided policy, then the sky's the limit. And that's it. It's just having that. It's almost like putting on a safety belt in the car. You have that protection that look, we're doing this and we're doing it really well, but we have our protections in place. Everyone understands the mechanisms. Everyone understands that no idea is going to be turned away, but some may need approval. Some may need a little bit of tweaking, and but it's encouraging creativity, but within safe boundaries for the organization, I suppose. So, that's it. We don't want to stifle creativity in any way, but just as platforms develop, as social media really evolves now with AI and everything, it's just phenomenal at the speed it's moving. We want to make sure that we maintain a consistent focus, that we keep those things in mind, whatever idea we're looking at. And then if we can't go wrong, we really can't go wrong. I think it's empowering the two together will be the best way to move social media forward for the organization.
Yeah, so we could probably actually work together on these things. I'm just thinking that, actually, because I know social media so well. But Mary, tell people about your template you have to give away if they want it.
Yeah, so anyone who's on this session, if you want to email me after, the email address is at the bottom of the session there, support@masterhrsolutions.ie. I'll share, and completely for free, I'll share my social media template with you. Now, obviously, I suppose this won't be bespoke to certain organizations, and I'm happy to have a further chat with you on that or any other additional needs that you may have. But if you want to email me after the LinkedIn Live, I'll be happy to share that template with you. If you're thinking about getting started with this, I'd encourage you to reach out. At the pace it's going, you definitely need, that's the foundation stone, really, is having something in place to look at this. And it's a starting point, and don't be afraid of it. And as I say, once you look at the template, if you think you need to have a conversation with me, or you need to put meat in the bones of it and debate it out, do I need certain aspects? We can do that. There's absolutely no problem.
And can you not just do it for them, no? Because people
absolutely,
don't
yeah, absolutely. And I understand it's down to time. It's down to some people don't want to even go near documents like that, and that's something I can do as well. It really depends on your own needs. There's absolutely no problem.
Okay, well, we have 76 people watching this at the moment, so thank you everybody who's tuned in.
Thanks, really everyone.
Appreciate it. And you can, if you're watching the replay again, you have the email there at the bottom, and please do reach out to Mary as well on LinkedIn. This is live on LinkedIn and Twitter and YouTube. So thank you so much, Mary, and that was really interesting. I really enjoyed.
Thanks a million, Samantha. And look, for anybody watching, I've had conversations with Samantha now with quite a while. I've been at Social Media Fest in Dublin. I know there's one coming up in Wexford at the end of the year. If you haven't got there, guys, you need to go. It is definitely one of the best events I've ever seen run for a full day event. And especially if you're looking at this and you're very new to social media and it's a space that scares you, whether you're in a company or whether you're in your own company, I would really encourage you to make that trip to Wexford, or make it to Dublin when it's on in future. But definitely Wexford is the next event, I believe. Samantha, what date is that in November?
Oh my gosh, 26th November.
26th November. I definitely encourage. It's one of the best days I've ever spent, and you'll see. Like, I'm sharing videos at the moment, and I'm very amateur compared to Samantha now. But
you did your first after, didn't you?
I did my first one that day after it. On the way home, I said, right, just take the plaster off, go for it. And yeah, it was absolutely nerve-wracking, but I think you get more confident as you go on. So I would really, if you're in the social media space this morning, you think, God, this is really new to me. Start by the template, but definitely book a place on that course, book a call with Samantha, because even the few tips that she's given me on my own LinkedIn page have made such a massive difference, an absolute mine of information. So I'm so delighted to have joined Samantha this morning on the call. And thanks a million for everyone for tuning in.
And thank you, Neil. Thank you, Neil tuned in as well. Thanks very much, Mary. Thanks for your kind words. I'll pay you that $5 later. Yeah. Okay. I appreciate that. Thanks, Mary, and have a great